Richard Goodall never imagined that the ordinary life he had built over decades would one day become an inspiration to millions of people around the world. Before the applause, the television cameras, and the unforgettable moment that transformed him into one of America's most beloved singing sensations, he was simply a hard-working school custodian who took pride in doing his job well. Every weekday began before sunrise as he unlocked doors, swept hallways, cleaned classrooms, arranged cafeteria tables, and prepared the school for another busy day filled with students. For more than 2 decades he worked for the Vigo County School Corporation in Terre Haute, Indiana, earning a reputation as someone who could always be counted on. Teachers admired his dedication, students appreciated his warm personality, and fellow staff members respected the consistency he brought to the school every single day. Although his official responsibility was to keep the building clean and safe, those who knew Richard understood that he contributed something far more valuable than spotless floors and polished hallways. He greeted students with genuine kindness, encouraged those who seemed discouraged, celebrated their achievements, and made the school feel like a welcoming place for everyone who entered its doors. One of the things that made Richard unforgettable was his love for music. Whether he was wiping cafeteria tables, pushing his cleaning cart through the corridors, or preparing classrooms before the first bell rang, he was almost always singing. His voice echoed naturally through the empty hallways, turning ordinary mornings into moments that many students and teachers would later remember fondly. Singing was never something he did to attract attention or impress anyone around him. It was simply part of who he was. Music had been woven into his life since childhood, providing comfort, joy, and hope through both good times and difficult moments. Growing up in Indiana, Richard discovered early that singing allowed him to express emotions words alone could never fully capture. He participated in church choirs, joined local gospel groups, and performed at community gatherings whenever opportunities appeared. Friends frequently encouraged him to pursue music professionally, convinced that his powerful voice deserved to be heard by a much larger audience. Yet Richard remained humble, believing that dreams often belonged to other people while his own responsibility was to build a stable, honest life through hard work. Like countless talented singers across America, Richard occasionally wondered whether he might someday receive a chance to perform on a larger stage. Encouraged by friends and family, he auditioned for The Voice, hoping that perhaps one of the judges would recognize the talent others had seen in him for years. Unfortunately, the audition brought disappointment instead of opportunity. He never received the breakthrough he had quietly hoped for, and the experience ended almost as quickly as it had begun. Rather than becoming discouraged or bitter, Richard accepted the rejection with remarkable grace. He understood that success in the entertainment industry often depended on timing, luck, and circumstances beyond anyone's control. Instead of allowing one setback to define his future, he returned to the school where he had built his career, resumed his daily routine, and continued serving his community exactly as he always had. To everyone around him, life simply carried on. The classroom still needed cleaning, students still needed encouragement, and another school day always waited just around the corner. Although he no longer expected fame to arrive, Richard never stopped singing. Music remained his greatest passion even when there was no audience beyond the students passing through the hallways. During evenings and weekends, he occasionally performed karaoke with friends, sang in gospel trios, and participated in local community events simply because it brought him happiness. Those performances reminded him that success was not measured solely by record deals or television appearances. Bringing joy to others through music was rewarding enough. Still, few people could have predicted that one completely ordinary afternoon would quietly change everything. In 2022, Richard was cleaning the school cafeteria just as he had done thousands of times before. The building was calm, his routine was familiar, and there was nothing unusual about the day. As always, he sang while he worked, this time choosing Journey's legendary anthem, "Don't Stop Believin'." He wasn't performing for anyone. There were no stage lights, professional microphones, or cheering audiences. It was simply another moment of personal enjoyment during an ordinary workday. Unknown to Richard, however, someone nearby decided to record his performance using a smartphone. The video lasted only a short time and was uploaded to social media without any expectation that it would reach beyond the local community. Yet within hours, thousands of people had watched the clip. Viewers were immediately captivated by the contrast between Richard's modest profession and his remarkably powerful voice. Comments flooded social media as strangers praised not only his vocal ability but also the sincerity and humility that radiated through every note he sang. As the video continued spreading across the internet, local news stations picked up the story, followed quickly by national media outlets eager to introduce viewers to the talented janitor from Indiana. Millions of people found inspiration in the idea that extraordinary talent could remain hidden inside an ordinary life for so many years. Richard's story reminded people that greatness often exists in places the world rarely notices. Among those who watched the viral video was America's Got Talent judge Howie Mandel, who publicly suggested that Richard belonged on a much bigger stage. His comments added even more momentum to the growing wave of public support. Invitations for interviews began arriving, social media followers increased rapidly, and people from across the country encouraged Richard to pursue the opportunity he had nearly given up on years earlier. Despite the sudden attention, Richard remained grounded. Fame had not changed the person he had spent decades becoming. The morning after his video went viral, he returned to work wearing the same custodial uniform, carrying the same cleaning supplies, and greeting students with the same warm smile they had always known. He understood that internet popularity could disappear as quickly as it arrived, and he refused to let temporary attention distract him from the responsibilities he had faithfully fulfilled for more than 20 years. His humility impressed people almost as much as his singing. While others might have immediately abandoned their jobs in pursuit of celebrity, Richard continued showing up every day because he genuinely loved the students, teachers, and community he served. What Richard could not have known was that his life was approaching a turning point unlike anything he had ever imagined. The viral video that seemed like a brief moment of online attention would soon open doors that had remained firmly closed throughout his entire life. Television producers began paying closer attention, talent scouts recognized the authenticity audiences were responding to, and conversations quietly started taking place behind the scenes. For Richard, however, life continued exactly as it always had. He still cleaned classrooms before dawn, still sang while working, and still believed that every student deserved to begin the school day in a clean and welcoming environment. Years of patience, quiet perseverance, and unwavering dedication had prepared him for an opportunity that was finally beginning to unfold. Unlike many overnight success stories, Richard's journey had been built over decades of persistence rather than months of ambition. Every disappointment had strengthened his resilience. Every ordinary workday had reinforced his work ethic. Every song he sang in empty hallways had kept his passion alive, even when no one seemed to notice. Soon, millions of viewers would discover what the students of West Vigo Middle School had known all along, that behind the mop, broom, and maintenance cart stood a voice capable of moving hearts across the nation. More importantly, they would discover a man whose character proved just as extraordinary as his talent, setting the stage for one of the most inspiring journeys ever witnessed on national television. For nearly 2 years after his cafeteria performance spread across social media, Richard Goodall continued living the same humble life that had defined him for decades. While millions of online viewers admired the viral video and praised his extraordinary voice, Richard remained focused on the responsibilities that had always mattered most. Every morning he arrived at West Vigo Middle School before students filled the hallways, preparing classrooms, cleaning common areas, and making sure the building was ready for another day of learning. Although strangers recognized him from the internet and local media occasionally requested interviews, he never allowed the attention to change the way he viewed himself. In his mind, he was still the same hard-working custodian who believed that honest work carried its own kind of dignity. Fame was exciting, but it was never something he allowed to define his identity. The months passed, and life gradually settled into a comfortable routine once again. Many people assumed the viral moment would simply fade away like countless internet sensations before it. Social media moves quickly, and yesterday's headline is often forgotten within days. Richard understood that reality better than most. Instead of constantly chasing publicity, he focused on living authentically. He continued singing whenever the opportunity presented itself, whether during community gatherings, local events, or while performing karaoke with friends. Music remained his greatest passion, but he never viewed it as a shortcut to celebrity. For him, singing had always been about expressing emotion rather than gaining recognition. That mindset would later become one of the qualities audiences admired most about him. Unknown to Richard, however, people working behind the scenes in the entertainment industry had not forgotten his remarkable voice. Producers from America's Got Talent had become aware of the viral cafeteria video and recognized something that went beyond technical vocal ability. They saw authenticity. Reality television often introduces talented performers, but genuine humility cannot be manufactured. Richard represented something increasingly rare in modern entertainment, a person whose story felt completely real. There was no carefully crafted public image, no elaborate marketing campaign, and no manufactured drama. He was simply an ordinary man who loved to sing. That sincerity resonated deeply with audiences, making him an ideal candidate for one of television's biggest talent competitions. When the invitation finally arrived to audition for America's Got Talent, Richard could hardly believe it. Years earlier, after experiencing disappointment with The Voice, he had quietly accepted that his opportunity might never come. Now, against all expectations, another door had opened. Friends, family members, co-workers, and students encouraged him to embrace the opportunity, reminding him that chances like this rarely come twice in a lifetime. Even then, Richard approached the invitation with cautious optimism. He understood how competitive the show was and never assumed that simply appearing on stage would guarantee success. His goal was not necessarily to win. More than anything, he wanted the judges and audience to experience the same joy he felt every time he sang. Preparing for the audition was unlike anything Richard had experienced before. For years, his performances had taken place in churches, community centers, school cafeterias, and local venues where the atmosphere felt familiar and relaxed. America's Got Talent represented an entirely different world. Thousands of hopeful contestants from across the country dreamed of earning a place on the famous stage, and only a small percentage would ever perform in front of the celebrity judges. Despite the enormous pressure, Richard focused on staying true to himself. Rather than trying to become someone different, he decided that the best approach was simply to walk onto the stage as the same person his hometown already knew, a humble school custodian who genuinely loved music. Another milestone made the experience even more unforgettable. Traveling to Los Angeles required Richard to board an airplane for the first time in his life. While many people take flying for granted, this journey represented a completely new experience for him. Leaving Indiana, visiting California, and entering one of television's most recognizable theaters felt almost unreal. The excitement was matched by understandable nervousness. Everything around him was unfamiliar, from the bustling production crews to the massive audience waiting inside the auditorium. Yet despite the overwhelming atmosphere, Richard reminded himself why he had come. He wasn't competing against anyone else. He simply wanted to sing from the heart. When the moment finally arrived, Richard stepped onto the America's Got Talent stage carrying decades of life experience rather than years of professional performance training. His humble introduction immediately caught the judges' attention. They learned that he worked as a middle school janitor and had spent more than 20 years serving his community. There was no arrogance in his words, only quiet gratitude for the chance to stand before them. As the conversation continued, Richard explained that music had always been part of his life and that singing brought him genuine happiness. The audience listened carefully, sensing that they were about to witness something special. Then the music began. Choosing Journey's timeless anthem, Don't Stop Believin', once again was both symbolic and deeply personal. The song had already transformed his life once when the cafeteria video became a viral sensation. Now it would accompany him onto the biggest stage he had ever seen. During the opening moments, Richard's nerves were visible. Like anyone standing before millions of future viewers and 4 celebrity judges, he understood the magnitude of the moment. But as the familiar lyrics filled the theater, something remarkable happened. Confidence gradually replaced anxiety. His voice grew stronger with every line, filling the auditorium with emotion, power, and authenticity that no amount of rehearsal could artificially create. The audience responded almost immediately. Smiles spread throughout the theater as people realized they were witnessing far more than a good singer. They were watching someone who had spent decades waiting for an opportunity without ever losing hope. Every lyric carried the weight of real-life experience. Richard wasn't simply performing a popular song. He was telling his own story through music. The years of hard work, disappointment, perseverance, and quiet determination seemed to echo in every note he sang. The judges felt it too. Heidi Klum watched with visible emotion as Richard delivered one of the most memorable auditions of the season. Sofia Vergara smiled throughout the performance, clearly enjoying both his voice and his genuine personality. Howie Mandel, who had already admired Richard's viral video, looked delighted to see him finally receiving the opportunity he deserved. Simon Cowell, known for his brutally honest criticism, remained completely focused on the performance unfolding before him. As Richard reached the emotional climax of the song, the atmosphere inside the theater changed completely. The audience rose to its feet, applauding before the performance had even ended. The standing ovation reflected far more than appreciation for vocal ability. It represented admiration for a man who had spent years quietly serving others without expecting recognition. When the final note echoed through the auditorium, cheers erupted from every corner of the theater. Then came the moment that would permanently change Richard's life. Without hesitation, Heidi Klum reached forward and pressed the coveted golden buzzer. Golden confetti exploded above the stage as the audience erupted into celebration. Richard stood frozen for a brief moment, struggling to process what had just happened. Years of quiet perseverance, countless mornings spent cleaning school hallways, and decades of singing simply for the love of music had led to this unforgettable instant. Tears filled his eyes as the reality finally sank in. He wasn't just advancing to the next round of the competition. He had earned one of the highest honors the show could offer. The judges surrounded him with praise. Simon Cowell described the audition as one of the most heartfelt performances he had witnessed in years. Howie Mandel reminded everyone that true talent often exists in unexpected places. Heidi Klum explained that she pressed the golden buzzer because Richard represented everything the show was meant to celebrate: ordinary people accomplishing extraordinary things. Their words confirmed what millions of viewers would soon believe after watching the episode. Back home in Terre Haute, excitement spread rapidly. Students, teachers, neighbors, and friends gathered to watch Richard's audition, celebrating as though one of their own family members had achieved the impossible. The entire community felt connected to his success because they had witnessed his kindness and dedication long before television audiences discovered him. Local businesses displayed congratulatory messages, schools organized viewing parties, and residents proudly shared his story across social media. Richard had become more than a contestant on a television show. He had become a symbol of perseverance, humility, and hope for an entire community. Although the golden buzzer guaranteed Richard a place in the live shows, he understood that his journey was only beginning. The competition would become even more demanding from that point forward. Every performance would be watched by millions, judged by America, and compared against some of the world's most talented entertainers. Yet for Richard, simply reaching this stage already felt like an incredible victory. After decades of quietly believing in his dream without expecting recognition, the world had finally begun to hear the voice that had echoed through school hallways for so many years. Little did he know that the most emotional chapters of his journey, and the greatest challenges of his life, were still waiting just ahead.